Okay, well, going back to David Irving, obviously he's a person whose views, especially with relation to the Jews, he must have found very repellent. How did you manage to sort of control your feelings and emotions towards him as you spoke with him? I mean, there's video on your channel of you interviewing David Irving and visiting Auschwitz with David Irving. I recommend it. In fact, all my subscribers, a lot of whom are interested in history, to look at the channel youtube.com/Alan Heath as one word. That's youtube.com/Alan Heath as one word. And have a look at some of your excellent films on these topics. But when you were actually interviewing David Irving, how did you, because you can't tell on those films your sort of like any personal feeling, it's purely objective question and answer. How did you manage to control your feelings of repulsion towards, if that's what they were, towards David Irving?
Well, the first thing you have to do is you have to remain objective, no matter who you're dealing with. Now, bear in mind that I've also spoken to people who are responsible for making one person I've interviewed who was responsible for making a gas fan. He built the pipes which led into the gas chamber. 2 years ago I went after a Nazi war criminal, a major war criminal. I learned where he was probably hiding. I was the first person who had been in the Meldungsamt in a place in Germany asking about him. Nobody had ever been there before. Now, what would I have done had I got this person? Well, you've got to try and remain objective, and it's irrelevant what happened, because nothing you're going to do is make people come back. You can point out what people are wrong, but if the point is what you're doing is an interview of somebody else, then you can't go on showing your own fear or your own loathing or your own disgust or whatever your emotion is. And when you see this, for example, done, often you can see it on American programs where they're interviewing somebody they don't agree with. Well, let them speak. Let them speak. If you don't let them speak, that's what's the point? I mean, the interview is not being interviewed.
Alan, what would you say? Would you say that it's a good or a bad thing that people who are accused in these days, in modern times now, in the 21st century, of having taken part in war crimes at the time of the Second World War, are still being looked for by, I think, the Wiesenthal, is it the Wiesenthal?
Yeah, Wiesenthal.
Institute, and they want to bring these people to trial. What do you think? Do you think that a fair trial is still possible after so many years have gone by, or do you think it's time to perhaps sort of draw a line, or will there ever be a time when you can draw a line and say, okay, well, if you've lived this long and you've suffered with your conscience for this long, then there's nothing more we can do with you?
Well, the head of the unit which looks for Nazi war criminals, he said the following. He said, well, you know, I mean, under what, you know, a doddery old man or woman who can't get up without help and is living in a wheelchair and all the rest of it, that may be one thing. But what about that? The old person who's got a nice house, nice garden, sits in the sun every day and eats quite well. Are we going to let that person off as well? The fact of the matter is that you cannot. The victims are still alive in many cases. And even if they weren't, they've got the family of the victims or others who can identify it in whatever way. This woman, for example, who was found in Austria, I think this is a total joke. That was David Irving was put in prison. He got a 3-year prison sentence for a speech that he made, which may or may not have been illegal at the time, I don't know. And when you've got a woman who is participated in acts of violence and murder, and the Austrians will do nothing about it. That is
double standards.
Yes, utter double standards. So, reactivation of the alleged reactivation of the Nazi Party with extremely flimsy evidence. Yes, that goes to prison. Mass murder? No, it doesn't. When we've got the case from Cambodia now. That person, although he's 66 years old, I think he is, absolutely, he needs to be tried. How many, you look at 1.5 million people murdered by the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia, yes, try him. When you've got the individual Nazis, yes, try him. I mean, had I come face to face with this character I was looking for, Lawrence Hackenhold, had I come face to face, I probably have said to him, look, I'll give you a deal. You can talk to me and I'll say nothing until you're dead. Alternatively, I'm going to the police.
Yeah. Yes,
I've probably done that. I don't know what I've done.
I think that would have been a very interesting deal to make. What do you think you would have had you? Well, obviously you don't know the man, but it's it's interesting to speculate on what he might have, what his reply might have been. I think it would probably be the first, maybe. Tam gdzie byliśmy, poproszę tutaj. Well, the food's arrived, so we better put it there. One further question, just to briefly wind up. Is this? What do you think about the German reaction to what the Poles have said about the Wrocław Centre for remembrance of the people driven out by Poland at the end of the war? How do your personal feelings go on that one?
I think the German government and the whole has behaved in an utterly responsible way. Successive German governments have behaved very responsibly to the question of those Germans who were forced to leave. In the case of Wrocław, what happened? Wrocław hung out. It was surrounded. The first Soviet units reached Wrocław around 10th, 12th of February 1945. Wrocław hung out until the very end, until the 9th of May. The Gauleiter, Handke, he actually escaped in a helicopter, one of the very few that existed with prototype. He escaped to Czechoslovakia, and he was actually killed by partisans shortly after landing. The German population, therefore, was still there in the town. It wasn't like places where they fled first. They were largely still there, and the Germans were deported in stages over the next 2 years. I don't think that anything is to be gained now by commemorating, although if the victims of but we must remember these German people, it wasn't their fault. They didn't vote for Hitler in 2/3 of the cases, more than 2/3 of the cases, if they bothered to vote at all.
Well, if the internet is anything to go by, then 99% of them didn't vote for Hitler, because I think I've only seen 1% of Germans on the internet ever admit to having had a grandfather that supported Hitler. But there we are, that's another matter. I suppose that's understandable.
No, there must have been more than that, because if
yes, there must have been, but nobody ever seems willing to. But I suppose that's understandable.
But if you take the election of November 1932, which was when the Nazi Party was at its peak, you had around 34. Then there's the elections of January 1933, when the vote actually drops. 2 million people didn't vote, for the Nazis had done before. 2 million votes. Then you've got the elections of April 1933, which can't be where you've got a vote for Nazi Party. There's a book that was written in the late 70s. Which actually indicates, I mean, I have looked at this, I've forgotten the name of it though. I mean, I looked at it in France in 1984, so I can't, unfortunately it was a while ago now and I can't remember. But it did show support for Hitler being very strong in some areas, and who actually voted for him. It's been quite surprising, and in many cases it would seem it was the middle classes who actually showed support, rather than the, I mean, was it communist votes going over the Nazis? I mean, it's hard to say.
Right, thank you very much indeed. Better stop there. Thank you.
Right. Thank you.